Hello world and welcome back to another Mekanism tutorial where today we're going to be showing everything you can do with the Fission Reactor and how much power you can actually get out of one of these steam turbines now that we have the Fission Reactor in play. As always, if this video helps you out in any way, shape or form, please do not forget to leave a like and subscribe, it really helps me out, and ring the bell button for more tutorials in the future. So to start things off, let's go with how to actually make the fission reactor by itself. Not actually how to make the fission fuel required for it, but just the machine itself. We're first going to need ourselves some fission reactor casings. This is going to require a lot of lead. Everything is actually going to require a lot of lead. So we're going to need 4 lead ingots and 1 steel casing in the center, and this will actually give us 4 reactor casings in total. Now you're going to need a lot of this, as this is going to be the entire frame of the fission reactor. Next, as well, similar with using the steam turbines from the last episode that we did, you can use reactor glass to actually peer inside your fission reactor. Now, reactor glass is made using regular glass, 4 lead ingots, and 4 enriched iron. That's obviously made in the enrichment chamber, and you actually get 4 of these reactor glass per craft as well. Moving on, we have fission reactor ports. You're going to need 4 of the fission reactor casings and 1 elite control circuit. You actually get 2 of these per craft. Now, this is going to be your input and output of your fuel and coolant, as well as your output of your heated coolant and your waste, as there is going to be waste in this, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Moving on from that, you actually need somewhere to put your fuel, and that is going to require the fission fuel assemblies. Each of these is going to cost 6 lead ingots, 2 steel ingots, and 1 basic chemical tank. You only get 1 of these per craft. Now you do only need a minimum of 1 of these, but you will probably need a little bit more than that. Now, to cap off these fission fuel assemblies, we're going to need the control rod assemblies. This is going to require 4 lead ingots, 4 steel ingots, and 1 elite control circuit. Again, you only get 1 of these per craft. Now, lastly, to actually build the frame, you don't 100% need the fission reactor logic adapter, but this is to do whether you want to have your reactor deal and interwork with a little bit of redstone. So maybe once it runs out of fuel, you could have it to automatically turn itself off, and so on and so forth. Now, this requires just 1 reactor casing and 4 redstone, and you only get 1 of these per craft. And finally, when it comes to the waste of the fission reactor, you are going to need this radioactive waste barrel. These are very important and you 100% need them, but they are also very, very dangerous and need very specific placing down, but we'll talk more about that in a bit. That's going to require 4 lead ingots and 4 steel ingots, and that gives 1 barrel per craft. And that's everything you actually need. It's a lot less than the steam turbine or the boilers, but again, it's still quite a lot of lead in order to build all this. So this is the fission reactor itself. It's not the smallest and it's also not the biggest, but it's somewhat minimalist. This is just a 5x5 cube. It's got a completely solid casing base, as all of them need to, and the framework has to be also casing, but around the sides you can see that we obviously have a lot of glass. Now, on this, we actually have, I think, 5 different ports, and these are going to be pretty much the minimum amount of ports you require. You don't have to have that. By minimum, you actually really need 4, but we're going to be pumping coolant back into this machine after we've used it while it's heated. Now, on the sides here, we have our 2 input ports. That is very, very simple. This is for inputting our fissile fuel, as well as our coolant. We are going to be using water today. On the back, we have our waste output port, and on the top we have got another input port and we have a coolant output port. Now, inside we actually have 2 of those fuel rod assemblies, and then on top we have the controller rod assembly. Now, the fuel rod assembly, they always have to be on top of each other, so no matter what you build, you have to always have your control rod assembly on top of your fuel assembly. Now, as you can see in there, we can actually have our fuel assemblies as tall as we want, but as long as they're always capped with the control rod assembly, it will work. Now, today we are not going to be covering exactly how to build this. As you can see, it's very, very small and it's very, very simple, but I will say that you can make this at a maximum of 18 by 18 by 18 tall. It's very, very massive, and every single square on the inside can be filled with these assemblies. As you can see, I only have it at the center, but we can do all 9 squares if we wanted to and completely fill it up. Chocker. The minimum you can do of this, I believe, is a 3 by 3 by 4 in order to just get the height, and that is going to be using just one of these reactor assemblies inside of it, and that's the smallest. Now these do not have to be in a cube, as long as they're in cuboid shape, meaning they could be at a long skinny rectangle, it could be really tall and thin, but it has to be some sort of cuboid. You can't have some sort of diagonal reactor. Now, the fission reactor doesn't directly make energy itself. It doesn't really exactly make heat. All it does is make heated coolant and waste energy. You just need a way to actually use this heated coolant and get rid of this waste energy. This is where the steam turbine comes in, as you can use the fission reactor to boil up water very quickly in order to make steam for the steam turbine. Now, the other coolant you can actually use inside the fission reactor is actually sodium, and using sodium you can use the heated sodium or the heated coolant inside the boilers, which you showed off last time, and that will give the boiler a little bit of a bonus in heat energy, creating a little bit more steam there as well. Today we're not going to really be covering the sodium, but inside of here, when you look inside, you see we have coolant tank and coolant tank over here, heated and cooled. Inside here you would have sodium, on the outside of here you would have heated sodium, and then you would just put that into the boiler would use it all up, and out of there you would get your regular sodium, and then you can plumb the sodium back inside of here. It's going to be the exact same system as when we use water, but we'll be showing that more off shortly. Now, actually being inside of here, you can see multiple different things. We've already covered the coolant tanks, but here we have our fuel tank. This is where our fissile fuel is going to go, and on the other side we have our waste tank. The waste tank is going to be where all the nuclear radioactive stuff comes into effect. Now, it does show here that it does have a temperature, and at the moment it's 26.85. That is just the temperature of the biome, so that is the temperature that it's sitting at. In here you would have to click the activate button once we have these two tanks here full, and scram we'll cover a little bit later. Inside of here we have our status. It tells us our basic energies. Inside it's got our statistics of once it's on, how much it's boiling efficiently, its surface area, its heat capacity. You can go all the way up to 98,000 joules per whatever. Then it's got our fuel status. It's got how much we're actually going to be burning fissile fuel and its limits. As well as that, it's got its current burn rate. This is how much fissile fuel it's going through at any given time. And as well as that, you can also set a level once it is activated. But now let's actually cover how we get this fuel, as it's a little bit of a long process, and we're going to have to use many new machines which we haven't actually covered before. The first machine we're going to use is the isotopic centrifuge. Now this is a pretty advanced machine. It's using the ultimate control circuits here. You're going to need 2 of them. You're going to need the basic chemical tank and 6 lead ingots. Now you only get 1 of these per craft as usual. And you're also going to need the chemical infuser. We have used the chemical infuser before, so we're not showing how to make that today. You are going to need the chemical oxidizer. This is going to require a dynamic tank, a personal chest, 4 infused alloys, and 2 basic control circuits, as well as just 1 basic chemical tank, and you're going to get 1 of these per craft as well. Moving on from that, you will have the chemical dissolution chamber. This is going to require 1 steel casing, 4 very refined obsidian ingots, 2 ultimate control circuits, and 2 basic chemical tanks. Lots of components to this one, and another advanced machine. Another machine we're going to need is the rotary concentrator. This is going to require 1 energy tablet, 1 basic chemical tank, 1 basic fluid tank, 2 basic control circuits, and 4 glass. It's a bit more of a basic machine. We may have covered this before, but we're definitely going to need this in this setup. And lastly, we're going to need the pressurized reaction chamber, another more advanced machine which we have covered before. So ahead of time, I have created ourselves a fully functional fission reactor. Now inside of here you can see that I've actually filled up all 9 squares. If we could get Whaler out the way. That's a little bit better. We can see that inside of here we actually have all 9 squares inside the fission reactor, just like I said we could over there. On this side we have our waste output, as we can see by the yellow input port over there. Then on this side we have our input of fuel, our fissile fuel, and then we have our coolant, which in this case is water, and we're just using an infinite water tank for this. You just use pumps. On top, we have our coolant in, which is going to be from the steam turbine I've made ahead of time, and then we have our coolant out. So this is where our steam is going to be going into our steam turbine and then back out and into our machine, of course, to get reheated. Let's actually go over how this fissile fuel is made. So we're going to go from when it's created all the way back. I think that's going to be the simplest way of doing this. First, we're going to need the isotopic centrifuge. This is going to be turning uranium hexafluoride into our fissile fuel. Now, as you can see, it's a little bit of a strange ratio. There's only got 1 millibucket in here at the moment, but that's because it's still filling up in here. I've been going this for a while. We've got 94,000 millibuckets in here, which is 94 buckets in total. So it does take a little bit to actually fill up in total, so you may need a couple of these isotopic centrifuges to get this a little bit more of a better ratio. So how do we make uranium hexafluoride? This is where our first chemical infuser is actually going to come into it. We're going to need hydrofluoric acid and uranium oxide. Let's go over how to actually make the uranium oxide first, as that's a little bit simpler. To get the uranium oxide, we are going to first need a chemical oxidizer, which we have in here. Now this is just using yellow cake uranium. It's a physical item, so if you were making this somewhere else, you could transport it in on a logistics line, but we obviously just doing direct machines here. So how do you make the yellow cake uranium? This is going to require the enrichment chamber, where you'll need your uranium ingots, and this will just turn it straight into our yellow cake uranium. Now obviously to get uranium ingots, you are just going to need to smelt your uranium ores, which you have here on infinitely. Now the uranium ore is also a ore that can be duplicated. This is obviously its basic form, but if you wanted to get this all the way up to 5 times the output, you absolutely could do that, but it would just be, a bigger setup. So this is just the basic level for now. So now let's head on to the other way. We need to figure out how to make hydrofluoric acid. Now for this, we are going to first need a chemical dissolution chamber. Now inside of here, we're going to need 2 things. One of them is fluorite, the other is sulfuric acid. Now the fluorite is a base game of Mekanism. It's already in the world, and you just get these fluorite ingots. Now this just needs to be put into an enrichment chamber, and then it gets turned into fluorite. Now there's no other way of doing this. You can't really get multiple. You already get 6 from 1. I mean, you could get some dust out of it and do some other ways. In fact, you can't even do it through crushing, so never mind. It is straight just enrichment chamber. But as you can see, 1 by itself with no upgrades, it's still producing a heck of a lot. So sulfuric acid, this is something we've nearly touched on before, and this is where we're going to need a second chemical infuser. Now in here, you're going to need water vapor, and you're going to need sulfuric trioxide. So let's cover the water vapor first. For water vapor, you're going to need first a rotary concentrator, and this is going to be in here. Now over this side, you have a little bit of a toggle. You are going to have to toggle this to begin with, because as you can see, this is changing gas to liquids. If you toggle it, it goes from liquid to gas. Very, very simple. So we want liquid to gas, and all we want is a little bit of water, and then that will just turn it into water vapor, and that goes straight into our chemical infuser. Very, very simple stuff there. To make sulfuric trioxide though, we're going to need to go around to a third chemical infuser, and this is where you start getting a little bit of a bottleneck. Now, to make your sulfur trioxide, you're going to first need oxygen, and you're going to need sulfur dioxide. Let's cover our oxygen first. We've done this before in a previous tutorial, and you're going to need the electrolytic separator for this. Very, very simple. You just plug in some water, you change your dumping excess to the hydrogen, so then just all the excess is pumped away and it will constantly keep working. By all means, you can pump your hydrogen or store it if you want. There are many machines that require hydrogen, but here we're just dumping the excess. And then the other side, you get oxygen, and oxygen is what is being pumped directly into our chemical infuser. Very simple stuff. Now for the sulfur dioxide, we're going to need to go to another chemical oxidizer. Now in here, you're going to need some sulfur dust. This is where the bottleneck is really going to be, where you're going to need probably a few upgrades for your machine. Now sulfur is again a solid item, so you're going to need to have your logical transporters if you want to do it from further away, but for here we're just doing it very, very close. But just as a demonstration, here's the logical transporter. Now to get sulfur, there are actually 2 ways of getting it, but we're going to be showing off one of these ways, one way first, and this is using the pressurized reaction chamber. Inside of here, you're going to need 2 things. You're going to need some more water, which is why we're using the same pump over there, using just 1 pump for 3 machines, and as you can see, it's more than satisfactory. As well as that, you're going to need oxygen, where we're using some more oxygen from this electrolytic separator. We just have it linked back over here. And then you're going to need coal. Now you can do this also out of coal blocks if you wanted to, but we're just using regular coal itself here. Now, as you can see, this is our bottleneck. Our problem here is actually we're not getting enough oxygen, so you may need to have a couple of these electrolytic separators if you wanted to, but the one pump will still probably be enough. This will give you your sulfur. As well as that, it does give you a little bit of hydrogen as a byproduct over here, but we are just pumping this into an ultimate tank here. As you can see, we've got nearly 64 buckets of hydrogen inside of here. But just to show you how to make your other ways of getting sulfur, you can also use the chemical injection chamber and use gunpowder and hydrogen chloride. It's going to require a whole other setup, and it's not really too effective unless you have some sort of modded creeper farm or even a vanilla creeper farm, but a modded farm would probably be a little bit faster. As well as that, inside of here, as you can see, we can use blocks of charcoal or coal if we wanted to, or even coal dust, but that's pretty much it. Coal or charcoal in order to get your sulfur. Now, that's a little bit of a confusing setup. It's not exactly too big. You probably can pretty this up or hide it behind a wall and just have your fissile fuel coming out into here, but how about we actually power this up now? Now, this is where things may become a little bit dangerous. Make sure that you obviously have enough fissile fuel and enough coolant, because if it runs out of fissile fuel, nothing really will too happen, but if it runs out of coolant and this overheats, this machine can actually explode. And if it explodes, your entire area is going to be radiated, so you want to be very careful of that. But just in case things do explode and the area does become irradiated, you may want to have yourselves a little bit of a radiation suit. Now, the radiation suit is very easy to make. It's pretty much just a lot of lead and orange dye. Orange dye can be from a mod, or it can be from Minecraft itself. Now, here we obviously have the helmet, which is just built the usual way as any other helmet, but with just a little bit of orange dye. Same goes for the chest plate, the legs, and as well as the feet. Now, this obviously will protect you from any bad substances that are in the atmosphere. So let's just place this on here and show you what it looks like. Isn't it great? Isn't it happy? But now let's actually activate ourselves our fission reactor. So reactivate here. We can hear that it's very, very, very loud. So let's back away from here. Actually turn the game volume down just a little bit over there. It's a very, very loud machine. So you're probably going to want this a little bit far away. But as you can see, we are still gaining fissile fuel right here. We are still gaining, even though we have just this one setup. So if you want to keep this under wraps, just make sure all the backlog doesn't get put through. So at the moment, it's sulfur that's pulling us down, so make sure that doesn't run out. As well as that, in here you can see that we have a burn rate of 0.1 millibuckets per tick, and we are at a heating rate of 1.95. The heat is currently actually stable. It's stabilized at 103 degrees centigrade, which means that we are boiling. We are boiling our coolant here. Our coolant, we've got loads of buckets, and the coolant here is saying it's actually empty. This is because it's being pumped out so quick, of course, and actually filling up our steam turbine. Now, just looking inside the steam turbine itself, that you can see that we are generating 2.79 kilo FE per tick. Now, you may think that this isn't actually too much, but inside of here, things are actually slowly ticking up. The reason why this isn't fully full is because we actually have not enough water being pumped into this. The water is staying perfectly fine, but it's just looping round incredibly quickly. Once there is enough steam to actually fill this up entirely and our fission reactor, things will be a lot more powerful. Inside of here, obviously, our fission fuel is still going, and then we can look inside of here. We have got ourselves the boil efficiency of 0.583. We want to increase this, so let's set a larger limit. This has got a burn rate of 0.1 per tick. Let's change this just up to 1 for now. It's now burning 1 per tick. We aren't losing any fuel, but it is obviously generating a lot more heat now. We're up to 19,000, and that is when a little bit more steam is going to come into here. And now the turbines are actually moving. There we go. Let's just turn down the volume a little bit more here. So you can see the burn rate's gone up. We're now gone up another 30 degrees roughly. We aren't actually losing fuel, but our backlogs may start going down a little bit. Now that we've turned this up to 1, let's take a little look at our nuclear waste tank. So you can see we're not actually generating too much nuclear waste, even though we are using so much power. So how about we turn this up just a little bit further? Let's turn this up to, let's say, 10. Here we've got a much larger burn rate now of 10 millibuckets per tick, and we are actually losing our fuel now. But as you can see, our temperature has increased a heck of a lot, but it's not at max temperature. This is where you're going to need a couple of more setups of these in order to actually generate so much power. And our wind turbine is now securely spinning now. This has still got a max amount of output. We can only make 1.6 MFE per tick, but that is because we have made a little bit of an inefficient turbine here. But if you had a much bigger turbine, one that's much more efficient, that's when you'll get more out of your fission reactor. But as you can see, it's very, very quick in order to get your fission reactor to actually power enough stuff. And our nuclear waste, we are starting to get just a little bit more in here now. Now I am using just an industrial matrix in order to actually store everything. As you can see in the top corner there, we have generated 350-ish MFE, and that is a heck of a lot of power and a lot better than using our ultimate energy cubes. And this can hold all the way up to 100 TFE in total if we really wanted to, but I doubt we're going to fill that up in time. For that, we would need a much more efficient steam turbine. Now lastly, let's show off scram. If we turn scram, that's basically the turn off. It will turn everything off, everything will go back up to where it needs to be, and our burn rate will stop. But this is essentially how we make our fission reactor. Now let's talk a little bit more about nuclear waste. Now we have a little bit of nuclear waste actually inside of here, and what I must stress to you is you do not want to break these nuclear waste barrels, especially if they're in your base. But what we can do is demonstrate what will happen if you do break them. So now I have flown very, very far away with these radioactive barrels. If I place one down, you can see that we've got the exact same amount as inside of here, but this is where things are going to get dangerous. I am now in survival and I have my radiation suit on. We have some nuclear waste in here, and let's break one open. As you can see, what's going to happen is you do get the item, but something else happens as well. You start getting these green particles. This means that the whole entire area is now irradiated, which is very, very bad for the area. I'm very surprised that this sheep actually isn't dying. I suppose since we had such a small amount, it may not go too far, but as you can see, it's still quite a distance away this is. But this is very bad even outside of your area, because as you can see, we're in the hazmat suit right now, but if I were to take this off, we would start taking damage. As you can see, and we are now 100% fully irradiated, and even if I put the suit back on, it doesn't help me. I am already irradiated and there's no way of getting rid of this. You will die. Luckily I'm on peaceful mode, so my hearts just keep going up, but that's why this is all very, very dangerous. If we go back into creative mode now, we can just get a little bit of an idea of how far this actually goes. So let's go all the way outside of the green area. I would say there's probably a good 32 blocks in every direction just for the small amount of radioactive waste we had inside of our barrels. If it was fully radiated, then the area probably would have been a little bit larger, as well as that a little bit more dangerous. But that is how I can stress the importance that you must not break your barrels anywhere near your base, otherwise the entire area is going to become completely irradiated. And the radiation is exactly why you do not want your fission reactor to run out of any coolant ever, as soon as it runs out of coolant, this thing is going to heat up incredibly and then explode. It's going to create rather a large explosion as it is, but then it's also going to create a lot of radiation in your base. So I actually recommend building this a long way away, just in case that ever happens, or make 100% sure you will never ever run out of coolant. But today, that is absolutely everything that I have to show you when it comes to the fission reactor. So if I did help you out in any way, shape or form, please do not forget to leave a like and subscribe. It really helps me out, and ring the bell button for more Mekanism tutorials in the future, as next time we are actually going to be covering what this box over here actually is. Since we're now generating so much power using the steam turbine and fission reactor, we need a better way of storing it, which is where this induction matrix actually comes in. So look out for that next tutorial. But until next time guys, take care.